I'm Alexander Mourant. I'm an artist, writer, and educator, and I'm a lecturer in photography at King's University in London. I am delighted to introduce Awoiska van der Molen. I'm going to embarrass you. You're an internationally recognised Dutch photographer who explores psychological spaces. Awoiska's work has been shown at the Victorian Albert Museum in London, Pier 24 in San Francisco, and many other institutions. Her work has been included in the Deutsche Photography Prize and the Prix Pichet. There's also a much bigger biography, but I think that's an good overview. Should we start by saying you've published 4 books so far with FW Books, working exclusively with the designer Hans Brennan. And I thought it would be nice to sort of discuss how that collaboration came about, and what is the nature of your collaboration, and how your book's born.
Up here are the 4 books that I made with him. And after some years photographing nature, I thought it could be time to bind them, bring them together in a book. And first, I slowly approached the first designer, knowing that I should not try to even design myself. Or I also never made dummies, putting images in order, because I thought if I find a designer I think I can work with, we'll see then how this process goes. Well, I saw my colleague photographers making often dummies, and I thought, should I do that? But I never played with my images in that font. So I found the first designer after half a year, not yet working with the person. I thought, maybe this designer, maybe I should work with this. So I would approach the second designer, thought about it for half a year, and I thought, no. And then I thought of Hans with whom I was in Art Academy, and then I thought this could be the right match, knowing his and sensitivity, but also pragmatism in the same time, and not too sentimental, because I was afraid that my black and white, sometimes aesthetic words become used for too pretty altogether. So I thought he had to be sober enough to make the first book that came out, Sequester. And then if you can go back to the overview, so this appeared in 2014, the first time. And the second book, right on the right up, it is a bit, it's okay, it's there, but it is a good example of that you should not make a book when you see it, you need a book. Or so the book should, or draw, because the images apparently maybe when there's time to bind it, or I don't know. And I said to Hans, after Sequester wasn't anymore available, and there were some exhibitions coming up, I need a book. So it's a thinner one, we call it a cami. So it's a sort of in-between publication. And also images from the first book appear in the second one, what I like, because then it doesn't mean that the first book is a closed-on project. I don't like projects anyhow, and that's right. But stop it and then start something new, because everything lower than 2 and keep growing. So the second one is the combination of newer and older image. And there are already so in carton, that's actually when I got these parts together with an image. I saw it very clearly. I had not done that before. So in the first book, there's only the carton inside the cover, under the dust jacket. In the second book, there's one image printed on carton, and in the third one, everything is printed on carton. You should skip in real to visit that upon. So it's an echo in one another, the first three. And then the fourth came up this year after, it's at Julia's table.
On the landscapes, as you did from the windows in this project. So, although it's a different subject matter, the earlier works were more nature works in the landscape. This is an urban environment. For you, it's a similar theme and approach, but it's blended seamlessly together, which I thought was really beautiful. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yes, because when we spoke about it, I thought about a text that was written about earlier the works that are upstairs as well. And this was actually a good friend and assistant, right hand and writer for Baldacchino, the Belgian photographer. And Erik Ilbo is not in my moments, unfortunately, but I asked him to write about my work and that little dissertation in 2007. And I have not read it for many years, but I want to read a piece from these words. In the urban images of Volleyball, there's no doubt that we are getting a direct look at the world. Yet at the same time, the doubt, longing, and quest of the photographer to be gone from this world are entering into our view, not a flight to an earlier or consciously chosen world blindness, but an obstinate exercise in letting go, relating, and maintaining. Of this, too, these nocturnal images speak, in the seemingly indifferent dark grey and black skies above the rooftops, and the countless steeples, and perhaps more than in anything else, in the white, shining windows of the homes. That's where the people are. The harsh light as a wound in image, as a blind spot of desire. So this I found quite striking to read this back after 16 years. So that usually connects, I think, my darker nature works with these works with this, wounds in the image. No. After photographing the nature work in nature for around 12 years, I was in Chicago for a second year, for a second time, and I think, I don't know exactly, at that time I already felt I could leave the natural area, but while in the evening just walking through small villages, I started to, I don't remember well if I really started to notice so consciously, but consciously I have to at least make one picture of a window. This is actually one of the first picture. So I let that be and continued forecasting, and in the hot summers of August, by accident I was there every time in August when it's the hottest month in Japan. So it's humid, just cool out. Inside you hear the air conditioning. No people in the street. Very special atmosphere actually. And the square here for two more windows, thinking, what's this? And then, of course, I only photograph analog, so back in my studio developing films, and it started to just grow more in my mind that I wanted to explore this more better. So that's how I continued this in the years after. And also not exactly know why, because we have to always explain why. Wow. The images hopefully should speak for themselves, but I think because now it's up in an exhibition, I forced myself a bit stronger to understand why. And in my nature works, the dark heart is often, we can say subject, but it's really clear coming towards you, as you maybe can see upstairs. And the whiteness in the illuminated windows brings me a sort of same warmth, or I don't know if it's a sort of shelter or a harmony that I can feel even when it's a closed off facade. This glass, these windows, or patterns in the glass. It is also the same space where I cannot really enter into as also it's great as well in the natural fields. So it's for me not a whole new project, it's a different subject in where I keep on looking for something that it's always hard to find, and that's why I make images in art. And it's not so easy to explain.
Votre travail questionne la mémoire, les lieux, les personnes qui habitent ou sont hantées par ces lieux, des lieux qui au départ sont ceux de votre quotidien et de celui de votre famille, avec vos proches, mais aussi des lieux éloignés géographiquement de votre centre de gravité intime et qui vous sont a priori étrangers, comme dans la série Eraser After Nature, montrée ici même au musée, ou The Inhabitants, votre série exposée à la Fondation Cartier-Bresson du 9 octobre de cette année jusqu'au 5 janvier 2025. Est-ce que vous avez besoin d'une traduction en anglais? Est-ce que quelqu'un peut dire en français?
It is a pleasure to have you here for the Photobook Days, especially since Photobooks hold such an important place in your work, which is famous partly in the United States. We're hoping to learn more about it throughout this interview. It's so that your work questions this book form, bringing it to unexpected directions, and sadly playing with its possibilities but also its limits. You are American, you were born in Columbus, Ohio, and you currently live and work in Hudson Valley. You studied social anthropology at the University of Ohio, and for more than 20 years you've been taking photographs that stand out thanks to their sensibility, their delicacy, their poetic reach, and the extreme care you give to all the parameters that come with photography as a way of expression. A great part of your work questions memory, places, and the people who inhabit them or are haunted by these places. These are places of your daily life, where your families and loved ones live, but also places geographically further from your own intimate sphere, which are at first glance unknown to you, like in the series Erasure After Nature, displayed here at the museum, or in your work, The Inhabitants, exhibited at the Cartier-Bresson Foundation from the 9th of October until the 5th of January.
Alors je continue la présentation. Un lien existe cependant entre les deux catégories de territoires que j'ai citées, a priori très différents, que l'on rencontre dans vos images. La manière précise, patiente, discrète, dont vous les approchez en usant d'un regard photographique sensible aux variations de lumière et de texture, à la géométrie invisible et à la force métaphorique ou narrative que renferme toute espèce de paysage, jusqu'au plus désolé ou sous-estimé, ce qu'on voit tout à fait dans The Inhabitants. Et depuis 2009, vous avez fait paraître un grand nombre de livres dans un large éventail de formats, certains publiés par des maisons réputées telles que Mac ou Choses Communes, et d'autres, en majorité, que vous avez auto-édités de façon minutieuse et artisanale, en une poignée d'exemplaires. Alors on peut montrer quelques images ici, donc nous avons The Inhabitants, et ici nous avons d'autres exemples de livres qui ont été fabriqués et auto-édités par Raymond Meeks. Parfois il s'agit d'objets uniques, ce qui leur confère alors un statut d'œuvre d'art à part entière. Ici on a Oxbow, qui date de 2011. On a également ici une double page de Pretty Girls Wonder 2014. Ou cet exemple d'un livre qui s'intitule Where Objects Fall Away 2010, où vous mettiez en regard votre pratique photographique avec la pratique graphique du peintre américain Ty Twombly. Et je crois que la peinture d'ailleurs résonne beaucoup avec vos images, peut-être on pourra en parler tout à l'heure. Je termine cette présentation en signalant que votre travail est exposé dans des collections permanentes de la National Gallery of Art à Washington, à la George Eastman House de Rochester et à la Bibliothèque nationale de France à Paris. Bon appétit.
So to go on with the introduction, in your images, a link emerges between those two kinds of territories, which are at first glance very different. The link being how precise and patient and discreet you are when you explore both of them through photography, and how attentive you are to changes of light from textures to the invisible geometry. You are also very aware of the metaphorical and narrative potential contained in landscapes, even the most arid and deserted ones. Since 2009, you have published many books in a wide range of formats, some published by renowned companies such as Mac, Showstone, but many others that you have made yourself and self-published, and that you've made by hand meticulously in a few copies, and some even remained unique objects, giving them the full status of works of art. To conclude this introduction, I wanted to highlight that your work is exhibited in the permanent collection of the National Gallery's Art in Washington, and in the George Eastman House in Rochester, and the National Library of France in Paris.
Donc, tout d'abord, une question très simple. Raymond, considérez-vous le livre photo comme la forme d'expression artistique qui sied le plus à votre démarche d'auteur? Autrement dit, le livre photo est-il pour vous la concrétisation ultime de ce que vous poursuivez en tant que photographe?
First question, do you consider Photobook to be the artistic expression that best suits your own approach as a novelist? In other words, is Photobook for you the ultimate realization of what you pursue as an artist? What question?
You're like, it's really, you were doing so well. I was convinced I would just give this.
Actually, there was nice coffee.
Nice coffee. Thank you. We've never met. This is our first time meeting here. I have no idea what he's about to ask me, or which lake's been kind. Thank you all for sitting in on this. I think to answer the question, I think the photo book for me presents the ultimate possibility. I don't think so much as narratively. Oftentimes, I think more about the way pictures that are aligned next to each other, or in a sequence or a series, have the potential to compound one another and create not only create something that feels like it's a transcendent or transformative experience beyond what a single image can deliver. So you have two pictures next to each other, and if it's done the way that I prefer to do it, it generates a feeling, and it generates this third thing that comes out of these two things coming together, and it creates an energy, and it creates a feeling or a response that is indescribable. You wouldn't be able to say, oh yeah, this picture and this picture can come together because they work together. It usually doesn't work that way. It's usually, I don't know why these work, but they're generating this feeling. And if I can say why it's working, it's generally too obvious, and so I don't do that, and I try not to do that. But mostly I appreciate it because, unlike a single picture or an exhibition that is made for the wall, pictures that are individual oftentimes seem to lose their wildness, or they seem to lose their that feeling that I get initially. Whereas in a book, each time you come to the book, it has the potential to change the way you feel based on how you come to the book and how you change when you come to the book, your own emotional state that I'm dealing with.
The first observation when discovering the book, it is the book of a photographer, but also one of a writer and poet. The latter is named George Wells, and wrote a poem that flows piece by piece throughout the book and creates its own motion alongside photographic sequences. Managing to make those two art forms coexist within the same ensemble is not an easy task. One can disrupt the other, reduce the reach or the impact of the other. I guess your agents already existed in Poet's words, but then, can you tell us how these words found their way and their spot in the book?
The words were written after the pictures were made, and they sort of came. George delivered the words at the last beginning, which had me completely unnerved. I would say that also there was a lot of trust, and the words that we tried to achieve a balance. I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but we tried to achieve a balance where the words, neither the words nor the pictures, were trying to do too much of the work. Where my concern was that the pictures recede a little bit to make room for George's words. That George's words were meant to invoke a presence of a human being, and in this case, invoke the presence to inspire the imagination to create a voice that could represent a displaced individual. Specifically, my proposal was set in Calais to focus on the life of the refugee. But ultimately, I didn't want to make a book, and George and I didn't want to make a book that closed down too closely around the refugee crisis, because that is an expanding, ongoing crisis that is globally, in terms of involuntary or voluntary displacement. It's not a question of if we will at some point be displaced, it's a question of when. Either we'll be displaced or feel displaced in this world. And so there was this back and forth between George and I to create space for that our expressions, our forms create space for the other. So at times my pictures recede, and at times his voice recedes. And so it's this balance between visual language and written language, or voice.
Alors justement, il y a un passage fort dans ce que vous venez de dire. Vous ne montrez jamais aucune personne, aucun migrant. On a uniquement la mémoire de ces lieux qui sont occupés de manière éphémère et les obstacles qu'ils ont pu rencontrer sur leur chemin. Il y a donc une présence en creux de ces personnes. Pourquoi ce choix de ne pas les montrer? Et je voulais savoir si vous étiez allé à leur rencontre avant de photographier. Parce que je sais que vous ne photographiez pas dans l'immédiateté, vous avez besoin de vous immerger dans des contextes de photographie.
There is a strong sense in the book you never revealed to all. Only the memory of the place they stayed in temporarily and the obstacle they had to face on their way, so this is understood full of the peasants. Why make this choice? Did you actually meet these people? Did you get to help with them?
My proposal for this project included portraits of refugees. So when I came to France, I had a 4x5 with the camera and color film, and I volunteered for an agency called Care for Calais, which put me in a warehouse to package goods for refugees, asylum seekers. And it also put me out in encampments where the refugees were housed. And so I got to meet asylum seekers, and I started thinking about how I would approach for making portraits. But what I found was happening was that the interactions started to feel transactional. Like I was looking at them as a subject and when I looked at them as a subject, I was unable to sort of engage with their stories. And at a certain point, I realized that I would have to do one or the other. I would have to either lean into that transactional relationship, sort of be transparent about it, and make portraits of the refugees. Or I could be present and listen to their stories and try to cultivate compassion and then take that out and make pictures, inhabiting that sort of, using my imagination to imagine their experience, but also cultivating compassion as a human being, and going places and seeing signs and residues of that type of life, and then making photographs that were sort of channeled through that filter of compassion for that life, for their life.
À l'intérieur de ce livre, la taille et la disposition des images varient. Certaines sont isolées, d'autres fonctionnent en vis-à-vis. Certaines occupent toute une page, voire une double page. L'espacement de la page est habilement utilisé. On sent que cet editing a été mûrement réfléchi. Qu'est-ce qui a défini le rythme interne propre à ce livre? Est-ce que c'est une logique d'ordonnancement et d'association purement formelle, ou bien c'est thématique, ou alors ce sont des associations narratives, encore chronologiques? Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer comment vous déterminez les séquences, la mise en séquence du livre et le montage?
Within the book, the size and arrangement of the images change. Some are isolated, some are facing each other, some take up the whole page, even 2 pages sometimes. And the blank space of the page is cleverly arranged. The editing was done with a lot of careful consideration. What defines the rhythm of this book? Is the arrangement and pairing of this image is strictly formal, or is it narrative and chronological? Is there some kind of a logic?
I usually, when I'm trying to make something, I usually apply this mantra of first thought, or first idea, best idea, and not stop and evaluate, just try to get into a rhythm and try to make, and then get to a point, and then start to remove what's not necessary, and then start to build again. And that to me is still the ultimate creative expression, is maybe visual arts.
On n'a pas dû y réfléchir très longtemps pour ce choix parce que le bleu est une couleur qui s'est imposée d'elle-même, étant donné que dans la série, la seule couleur qui est présente, c'est le bleu. Et le bleu, il vient d'une combinaison d'éléments soit aquatiques, soit liés au froid. Parce qu'il y a toute une série d'images qui a été photographiée dans des grottes en fait, qui sont des anciens glaciers. Donc la glace a disparu, mais elle a laissé des traces sur la roche, ou bien des grottes de glace. Et il y avait une atmosphère visuelle aussi très froide qui a donné cette teinte bleue. Et étant donné que c'était la seule couleur, on est tout de suite parti sur un objet bleu. Et puis, suite à la proposition de la graphiste pour ce type de reliure, on s'est dit que le bleu serait aussi tout à fait à propos pour l'intérieur. Et ça envoie aussi un bleu de l'océan, pour le secret.
Sur ces pages, justement, ces pages non massicotées qui ne sont pas coupées. Si Tiago, par exemple, peut expliquer un petit peu.
I don't know if I got it all right, but there's also the picture of you pregnant. I don't know if you mentioned that. So there's only 3 pictures in the entire series that has the color. And it's the picture of the cave and the picture of the glacier, but also there's a key feature that it's not very immediate for the viewer to understand what's happening there, but it's a self-portrait of Benedicte when she was pregnant. So there is these kind of 3 key pictures that they're the only ones in the series that have the color, and they all have this blue color. And of course, I think there is a metaphorical symbology for the blue and to be hidden that then relates to these 3 pictures, and that's why we decided to have it inside, which is not very positive, but it's just subtly there. You can see it's there, but it's not so immediate, and it's something that you discover, and we wanted to have something on those terms that they are not so in positive, although the cover is also blue, but it's something that it's alone the book, but it's just, there hidden in the back, and you only see depending on the way you flip the book.
Et du coup, je reviens sur cette forme particulière de ces pages qui sont non coupées. Peut-être, Bénédicte, tu peux nous en parler de cette présentation qui est particulière, justement, ce dos caché, ça renferme cette couleur.
Bah alors, oui.
Mais oui, pour nous, c'était ça, c'était le fait que ça peut-être renvoie à plus que ce qu'on voit et cette profondeur et ce bleu dont on a expliqué la présence, qui donne aussi plus une autre dimension en fait, au livre et qui peut-être aussi métaphoriquement peut renvoyer à l'invisible, parce que le livre parle aussi de ça, à travers les zones. Oui.
Alors, il y a la volonté forcément de faire quelque chose toujours, j'imagine, un petit peu différent du livre précédent. Lorsqu'on regarde, lorsqu'on jette un œil à ce qui reste, ce précédent livre, on remarque tout de même qu'il y a des choses un petit peu en commun. Alors, comment vous êtes positionné par rapport à ce nouveau livre, sachant ce qui avait été fait sur ce qui reste?
When we look at your previous work, what remains, we notice some similarities and a continuation of the same atmosphere. So what could you say on this link between the new work waves and what remains?
I mean, I think there's one thing that is very key on this discussion, which is the fact that when you see Benedicte's work, there is this continuation. So there is a way of photographing that is evolving from point A to point B, but you can feel this continuation. And although it's a specific new thematic that she wanted to approach, but you still feel that continuation of her work. And for the fact that she proposed to publish with us the second book, that was actually one of the key discussions between all of us, including with the designer, which was either we go in the direction of doing something completely in the same direction and keeping, for example, the same binding and some other specific things that happen in cycling tests, or we go for a completely different approach. At the end, I think we strike something in the middle, where we kept some key elements, but then we changed other things. So one of the key elements that we decided to keep was just the format. If you put the book side by side, they're both 20 by 28 centimeters, so they're the same size. And then there are some details on the graphic design, but that's more on the graphic design level that the designer wanted to bring in. For example, these details with the title, where she includes part of the microscope or the what do you call it? This. Yeah, but the other one. So both of these elements, both the jellyfish in cycling tests and the planet in the second book, they are also kind of key elements in narrative. So she decided to use those to compose the title. But then there were some graphic tricks that we used on cycling tests that we completely dropped. And this is because of the relation of the book with the thematic. Cycling test was a lot about the idea of breaking a structure, and make a rupture from something very static to something more organic. So what we decided to do in second test was to have a black and white narrative in uncoated paper, and then suddenly there's a break, and you have color pictures in with a lot of varnish, reflective paper, and there you feel this break. So we wanted to bring to the objects literally some of the ideas of the concept of the book. And this specific trick didn't make any sense to do it in onyx, so that's why we also changed the kind of binding, and we decided to use other things like the Japanese paper with the blue inside, which reflected much more to the themes. Okay, bonjour again. Last but not least is Nigel. I shall just give a brief introduction to Nigel's practice. Nigel Baldacchino, apologies, is an artist and design architect based in Malta. His practice explores photography, music production, video, text, and the design of physical objects and spaces. Here's one of the original initiators of Those Eyes, These Eyes They Fade, which is the exhibition upstairs. I think Nigel birthed the idea with Benedicte and Anne. His work is also in the collection of Malta's National Beauty Art Museum, and he's been published in Guts Magazine's Fresh Eyes. So it's a pleasure to talk to you, Nigel. All right. I think you could. Do you just translate? So we have a lovely video. So there's no fiction, we might have the video going through. I thought maybe I'll ask you, please, could you start by introducing the Penantu project, and what was your interest, and how did you
That's a great question, thank you. It's redundant, it's a surprise. Penantu is technically the term for Pinetum in Malta, where I come from. And Pinetum is just a way to refer to a bunch of pine trees in one place, basically. But the only time that I ever saw it used or heard it used was for this specific part, the recent picture about. So colloquially among these people, Pinetum exclusively refers to this park, even though the formal name is Jubilee Grove. It's a park that's basically formed out of a layer of political and social anomalies, which is absorbed in its form and its trees and its mood, etc. It started off as fortification glacis. So a glacis is basically a slope of land, barren land, mineral land, that you put in front of a fortification, so you maximize visual from inside the fortification. With some irony, the British rulers in 1935, Malta was belonged to the British, responding to some rumors of insurrectionist gatherings in the area, flooded the whole place with an arbitrary row and columns, like a grid of pine trees, which it feels like it doesn't belong to the place, and it was very a random way of doing things. So, kind of the first obstacle was introduced. That would eventually, throughout the 20th century, develop into a social phenomenon as well. With the cars and the roads around it, it was basically impossible for pedestrians to go to it, because it was isolated, even though at the same time it is impossible to ignore, because it's in front of the capital city, so going in and going out, it's in your face kind of thing. And get a bit of cognitive dissonance. Towards the end of the 20th century, then it shifted a bit. So the heroin culture in Malta was spiking up. A big clinic, public clinic, is nearby. Also the police headquarters, but that's less important. So heroin culture started really occupying the space. At the same time, a group of male cruisers started using the space, and even among the cruising community in Malta, there are a couple of sites around. Even among that, it was a special tribe, basically, of middle-aged people with families, heteronormative families at home. Malta's very Catholic, hyper-Catholic. So they were driven to this double life, where they were marginalized, etc., and they found a kind of camaraderie between them in this park. Eventually, heroin went down. They cleaned the place, 600 cylinders, streets and everything. They just cleaned the place, and the cruising survived. So it became basically the place of cruising known in Malta. They are called Nemisa, which is peeping toms, basically. I grew up with that, and the stigma displayed for me also told things to me personally. I grew up around that, and no one ever told me not to go there. It was just understood, even though no one talked about it, that you shouldn't go there. No, I had no idea why. So I grew up with this kind of ghost. In 2020, with COVID, another group came along, which is expats coming to Malta, living there, had no idea about the place, its cultural significance, nothing. And they started to use it with families, dogs, children on the grass, etc. So for this window of time, another peculiar anomaly was happening where at the same time of day and everything, these cruisers would be going around, would be like signal posts along this path, and in front of them, families, children, dogs, and everything, and there was no communication. To me, it felt like a very surreal moment, and it felt a bit like the place itself had inherited this cognitive dissonance that these people had been experiencing all their lives. So now it's kind of that. And now, after my project, after I took these photos, the dummy is still unpublished. It is already a part of history because the government issued plans already to make it into a basic regular park, flooded with lights, with CCTV cameras, with a cafeteria and everything, a playing area, and fence it off, basically. So it started with a political maneuver by the British, and it's basically gone again with another political maneuver, which is happening soon. Good luck translating that.
So at what point did you know all fears become a photo book?
The answer is now I'm going to become short. Okay, don't worry about it. So, this is the first project that I ever started as a photo book. For several reasons. One of them was that it felt like the subject called for it. It called for an intimate interaction. It called for the scope of it to be a lot of images that give context to one another. And add to all that, it was at a point in my life where I had met Anne, etc., and those eyes, etc., and I felt I have always been an exhibition person. I always exhibited my work, etc. So it was the first time I was getting into photo books, the culture of photo books, etc. And I started developing that sensibility. So I started it off as a photo book. And yeah. And the difference for me was the exhibition and photo book approach. It was a bit like the difference between writing prose and writing poetry. You're still writing, the vocabulary is still